So thank you for arranging this, and I'll let you. Oops, I'll let you get started.
Yes,
Maybe you can just introduce.
Sure. So thanks everyone for joining. I see that, more people are joining right now. So I've been, following, I really wanted to have this session to kind of introduce Ed's technique, the parallel model to you guys. I've been talking about it for years in my blog post, and, to all my friends, they all know me, that there is a war going on copy and paste and, button-free model movements. And so I was insisting, and I was, putting pressure on Ed to, let's do this. But Ed was always like, no, we have to still, kind of make progress. We have to, so he was always like, kind of ignoring this. But eventually I was able to convince him to have this session with you, all of you guys, so that you can see in live, what Ed and I has been working for a couple of years. Ed, how many years has been since we started?
More than a couple of years. Definitely.
More than a couple of years, exactly. So yes, I'm very happy, to have Ed here to show you, the work and explain to you, the whole technique and how it works and what are the benefits.
Fantastic. So Eddie, I'm very nervous about this, and I'm not going to open Excel, if you can believe it. I'm not going to open Excel. I've cheated in order to make sure we don't take up too much of your time. We're going to illustrate how this whole thing works and how maybe it can really help you. But we've made little videos where I learned how to make the Excel on a fast forward. So we're going to have some illustrations with this and go through it. And maybe I'll do this one. If you don't care about copy and paste clunking along, if you say, okay, I can have a little model, but I still have to press a button, and if I would make a data table, I'd have to put it in my macro. And if you don't experience pain, and Eddie, is it true you experience pain in sculpting different issues, and if you have multiple different debt issues, that causes some pain?
That's correct. Exactly. That's the word, pain.
And what about do your people at your company, when you're in a meeting, like to watch you press a button, or do they like it better when there are no buttons?
Well, they don't mind if it doesn't take time, but if they have to wait, and talk about the weather while, the model is running, and then that's the big issue that,
Very good. I see. So we're going to talk about how we can get this. Now, if you don't care about these things, then you might want to, you can always just do something else. You might want to not want to do this, watch this thing. And so here's what, over the years, Eddie and I, we have discussions about not only the modeling, but more philosophical discussions on how it can really be useful to people. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
We're not in any way replacing Excel. We're not hiding anything with a password ever. You can see exactly in this session, we want to show you exactly how these things work. As we've progressed, we started with just taking buttons away from a simple model. That's maybe a way to describe it. But now we've evolved on how to what happens if you have 3 different debt issues, and what happens if you want to use a different pattern, not a flat DSCR, to sculpt the debt. What happens if you want to optimize all sorts of different things? That's where it's evolved. And Hedy, I think you've talked about using this as an auditing tool, even, right?
That's correct. Yes, we're gonna. I think you're gonna go through that later in the presentation. But one of the things that I use the parallel model for is to cross-check basically my calculation, my Excel formulas, and because everything is done, over, in the background in VBA. Once it is installed in your model, is going to basically redo the calculation. So you can also cross-check with your model and see whether you get the same result as the output sheet of the parallel model. And for me, so many times, I had mistakes in my model, which was being detected by, the parallel model.
Very good. I'm not going to make any comments. Ooh, I'm so tempted. I make mistakes a lot. I'm the best at making mistakes. My whole life is about making mistakes. The auditors sometimes don't catch the mistakes. Let me be polite. But we put this picture of two engines. There are two ways to do this. And Eddie told me, no, we've always got to show the copy and paste and the parallel model next to each other. We're not going to suggest you just get rid of a copy and paste.
Yes.
So maybe just a little bit of history before we get started. The first time we accidentally found that this might work is we tried to make a goal seek where you don't want to press the goal seek button. You want the goal seek to automatically run in Excel. And that's not, it's a little bit tricky to do, but you've got to read in the things that go into the goal seek and make it go around and iterate and put it out. And it all worked. Okay. And then suddenly we realized, oh, well, you can solve a circular reference with a goal seek. And so we tried it on a very simple case. I remember exactly where I was. And I said, oh, it works. Why does it work? And then we tried it on a more complicated case. It still worked. And then we tried it more and more, and it still worked. Okay. And then I can remember, Henny, you actually used the kind of a simple version with one dead issue a long time ago, right?
That's correct. Yes, I actually attempted, because to kind of have it in my models, and yes, so that was the first thing, a very simple one with only one tranche.
And then we met in Istanbul, and we had to put 3 different debt issues in without anything fancy with sculpting or anything else, just 3, the interest during construction and the fees and the commitment fees and the DSRA for 3 different issues. And the model started to grow. The UDF started to grow. And Hedy, I remember, suggested making a template. And I thought, oh, I don't know. And then I'm just going to go through this quickly. We tried this enormous template, and it was then Hedy called me back and said, let's try to put this template in my model. And I had made such a big mess. It was ridiculous when I tried to put all the different issues in, the sculpting and everything else into one thing. And then the pandemic came. Oh, I was so depressed on the pandemic, but we started working. We threw it all out. We threw it out and tried to make a version that is really, really usable. That's why we're going through this today, and we're presenting this. And I know, Eric, you might be there, and I've made some presentations with some videos, but this finally, we've got it hopefully to a usable, a real practical and usable level. Now, I'm just going to proceed for a minute here, just so in case you don't know kind of what the way this thing works, is you make a UDF, and I'm going to now try to run a couple of videos. Okay, and this one I've made it really fast. So this has got a fee. It's a very simple case where the fees go up, the debt goes up, the fees are higher, the debt's higher, and you go around and around. And what you're doing is making a function, and you make a function that has a name. In this case, the function is named fees. And when you have to, the reason we named this a parallel model is because you have to put the equations, uses of funds is CapEx plus fees, debt is uses of funds times fees, and there's an obvious circularity. Now, when you resolve this with a function, rather than with a copy and paste, we're just showing you how a goal seek works. And then we're putting a data table in. Now, Hedy, I should ask you, you might think, well, why don't we just use the iteration button in Excel? And I don't think that's right? We can't do that.
Oh yeah, that one is definitely a no-go. So I think, I mean, we are fighting with copy and paste, so let's not go back to iteration.
The iteration, you can't do a goal seek. Your model becomes totally unstable. It's a very, very dangerous thing to do. Your model can become very slowly. So that's just how you can create a very, very simple kind of a very simple resolution. Now on the next slide, what we're going to do, we have talked to a couple of people who've tried this, and they've been very frustrated and angry. And they say they've probably spent a week, trying to just get some of these things out. And I totally understand this because I made every mistake. I'm not a programmer. Okay, I read 2 pages of a VBA book once, but I can go to Google and look at it. So now we're going to go through an example which is much more realistic, where you've got the funding problem, you've got a circular reference associated with interest during construction, a DSRA, and with fees, and then you get into some little things that might be a little that are difficult, but it's certainly doable. So just a few minutes ago, I made a video. I haven't tested this out. Basically, I'm showing circular references, the blue lines, and those blue lines are not simple blue lines. They go back and forth. Now, when you make a function that goes, it's like a transpose function that goes into multiple different outputs, well, you have to use this thing where you define, I defined a variable called output, and then you have to put a dimension around those things, and it starts to get a little bit painful. And then what you have to do, in this case, we're reading in CapEx. Every time you have something that goes into a function, it's got to be read in. You can't use range names. You can't read anything from Excel. It's got to be like the IRR, where you read in the dates if it's XIRR and the values. Okay, and then it gets really a little more painful if you're accumulating debt from one period to the next, and then you've got to go around the periods. And I started doing something here. Obviously, the first time I tried this would have taken me weeks to do. Okay, but you start really seeing it, and it's not so hard. And that what you can do is put the sum functions in, and you can put all of these things in and write a function. You can write a function that works a little more in detail with the it works. You're doing your model. That's why we call it again the parallel model. That's it. So that was just a little bit of an illustration on what how it gets a little complicated. Now that's all fine. That's all fine. You can say, okay, I'm going to write a function like that. But then when you have many different debt issues, when you want to incorporate sculpting into your debt issue, into your analysis, then it starts to explode. And that's what we're going to show you now. So that's when Hedy tell me, try to write a template that we'll be able to use and put in other people's models. I remember when, must have been 4 years ago when she asked about it. So now what we're going to do is show you this. Hedy, any comments? I'm talking too much.
No, that's perfect, Ed. Please go ahead.
Okay, so now we're going to show you a little bit how we can take the same general approach, but this time use different multiple debt issues, and use sometimes when you might have debt repayments occurring in a monthly model every 6 months or every quarter, how you can resolve some of those and some of the other things. And again, this is a little bit repetitive perhaps, but our basic idea was no buttons, allowing data tables like we showed you, making advanced making advanced kind of sculpting. And here, what we have done really is what we do is take an issue. Let's say this issue of debt service reserve account changes. And you can make a very good argument that those changes in the DSRA should either be included in CFADS, or you can even go further and say those changes should be included in the denominator of the DSCR when you do sculpting. And that's really painful. I notice people don't do it. They don't do this in the debt structure just because it's so painful. Multiple debt issues are really painful. Sometimes having a letter of credit can be painful. So we've written all of these things. And what we have done with this template is just try to incorporate a bunch of these into the equations. Just working through these, if you can really work through, this is where project finance modeling gets a little more interesting. Now, what we want to emphasize is that this is just a function. You don't have to put it in. It's like you add a sum function. It's like Excel added this XLOOKUP function recently. It's just a function that takes some inputs and makes outputs. When you think about the XIRR, it's actually kind of a funny little similar thing, because the XIRR has a guess. It's got a circular reference. You look around for different interest rates until the NPV goes to 0. I think that's what it does, at least. Okay, so now we're going to show you, and Hedy, please interrupt me on some of this. We're going to show you example, a relatively simple example. And what we have is, what we keep doing is making, we call it a template or something, but it's got the function in it and nothing else. This has just got the function, no attachment to your model, no resolution of your circular reference, just to see how things work. And I've put a little video on this one, and I call this playing around with this.
So Ed, before we go to the video, maybe you can pause. It's just like, to tell people that the parallel model is just 2 worksheets, one is for the inputs and one is for the outputs. That's what you're showing now, right?
Excellent, thank you. And the inputs are, we need some basic inputs from your model. The top is some timing flags, and then we have some CapEx and some EBITDA, okay? And then we also have some inputs which look complicated, but they're not. If you just have one debt issue, you need interest rates, you need commitment fees and the basic things about debt. And that, now we'll just look at the output and kind of see how it works. So the idea here is, and we've gone through this, I'm showing you right now, we've got a little flag for the DSRA, okay? And so we changed the DSRA around. Everything is circular, and we have an important button there. This is a button to turn the whole little function on and off, so we can go and play with all the things. And I'm putting one extra construction period here in, and taking the operating period and moving it around just to show you can do this. And you don't have to have this function operating all the time. You run it, and now we turned it on to have it running. And the first thing we're going to show you is some of the funding issues. So in this case, we just switched it from pro rata to equity first. You can see the equity is going in first and then the debt. And importantly, we're just showing a little piece of the model up front in this output, just a little piece of the model. So you can see the key things that you're going to need in your model, which are the repayment and the circular effects of the interest during construction and the fees during construction and things like that. And now we're just showing you, I did it quickly, we're showing you, okay, let's set our model, let's size our model with debt to capital, or let's size our model with a fixed amount of debt. That's what, and you can see hopefully in that little sources and uses table. And then let's do some different sculpting. In this case, I put fixed, and we just hold the DSCR flat to produce the fixed level of debt. Okay, and then we put a minimum DSCR in, so you pay it off on the minimum, and then I should have had a curved DSCR. I just put a grace period in, and then you're redoing the sculpting with a grace period. Now, if you can imagine, you could do this all with your model. Every time you do it, you'd have to click a copy and paste, perhaps. You can imagine the amount of lines it would take to do the sculpting and do the sizing and be able to, at the same time, redo the DSRA and get the outputs to your model. Now, in a minute, we're going to show you, you can say, fine. This is just some little crap little example. You just spend a little time messing around with this. Show me how this works in a real model. Show me how this works in these models that I have seen that are getting bigger and bigger every year. Show me how it works. And what, Hedy, what's this doing? It's showing some
reports, yes. So you have the option also to produce different reports. I mean, you can have a simple report, or more detailed report, so that you can do a drill down of all the, calculations. So it's basically exactly like your model. There are different calculation blocks that will be produced in the report.
And it's important to say, I think, that the reports are totally flexible. It's like you would. It's not exactly, because it's a tiny bit more difficult, but you can make your own reports just to mirror your own model. Now, I'm going to show you two more very quickly. Hopefully, this is a case where there are two different debt issues. So yeah, you can see up there, I turned the model off, and you can see I changed the number of issues to 2 instead of 1. When you turn you can turn the model, the UDF, on and off to make sure it will never, ever slow down your model if you're worried about that. Because it is doing a lot, there's a lot. And if you run it every time you're making a little change in your model, you don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm switching it on and off a little bit. I have 2 different debt issues. And now you can see the reports are just a little bit different. It's got issue number 1 and issue number 2. And right now, we just input the repayment. That's what we used to do. We just input the debt repayment. And now, if you look really fast, I'm going like crazy, because I think I put the fast forward a little too fast here, perhaps. Now I'm changing this to sculpting. So now we're sculpting both different debt issues. And now if you look at that line with the repayment, and you can see the DSCR that works, and both issues are being re-sculpted at the same time. You do that with the DSRA, and now I changed it to this curved DSCR. And you can see here, if you look carefully, that the DSCR went down to 1.2. It started at a higher level. Okay, whoops,
right.
Is it going now? Okay, and now I'm changing the debt tenor on one of the 2 issues. Hedy, is it true that sometimes you have, how do you have 2 different issues in some real transactions?
Yeah, most of the time, Ed, I have like minimum 2 debt issues, and one is for like maybe a concessional loan or a DFI tranche, which might be in a longer tenor, and then a commercial tranche. So that's why it's, yeah, I think minimum 2 is something that I always have across all my models.
Very interesting. So, but that, if you tried to sculpt 2 different debt issues, that's always a little bit painful, right? And are they normally sculpted? Is one fixed and one sculpted, or they could be anything?
They could be anything, but most of the time, if one is sculpted, both of them are sculpted, yes.
Interesting. And then now what I have noticed these days is that this is so painful in that, in Excel 2003, you could only go to column IV. So you could never make a monthly model. Now I see more people making monthly models, and you can see we've added, in this case, I'm doing it really quickly again, but we're adding the same sort of thing, but this time you're doing the sculpting analysis, which again is a little tricky. you're doing the sculpting analysis with 2 different debt issues, and the model is month by month, but it accumulates, and you can of course accumulate it to quarterly or semi-annually, and you can see the periods. Now, again, that thing at the top where it says repayment for the issue, you're going to put this into your model. So far, all we're doing is just showing you how, think of it as a PMT function in Excel or something, just showing you a really big function. We'll get to issues about changing it, and if you have to enhance it a little later. And again, then I'm showing you kind of how you can make sure that this thing is really working. In this case, that I didn't make any mistakes. So that's just working with the function. And these are just notes on it that we put to ourselves. And now we're going to talk about how you actually would do it. Hetty, can you tell me how you used to do it? I don't, which you were okay with, I can't believe. Remember when you copied, you went in the VBA code, you copied it,
That's
you
correct.
had to make a new macro and you pasted it, and it was all in one enormous.
Yes. So now you can do it with like a click of a button. That's when the button is useful.
you used to be okay with, you know, here's the problem. If you have a macro, I call it a macro with a sub, you can have the one sheet open and the other sheet looks to the, you can call it from another sheet. With a function, with a user-defined function, you have to copy it from one sheet to another sheet. You can't just call it somewhere else. And we debated, okay, you can make a fancy little add-in and you could do all this fancy stuff. We want to keep your models totally clean if you have S&P something, and we don't want to override anything in your Excel. So now we're going to show you how to implement the model. And then, Hetty, explain kind of what you do after you link up the, you take your model and link the inputs and then put the outputs from the UDF back into your model. You have to do these verifications, right?
That's correct. Yes. So what I do is just like exactly like the same thing we do for copy and paste, just to make sure that the copy line is exactly the same as the pasted line. So we do the same thing. I do the same thing in my models for the UDF, you know, so that and then that's when the cross check happens, you know, so I see that whether the values that I have in my, you know, calculation matches with what the UDF is actually, you know, giving me. And that's when I see some discrepancies. Most of the time, I would say 99% of the time so far, the problem was with my calculations. Because if, you know, you make an error with the code, you know, it's going to give you errors and those nasty errors. So that's the thing.
I don't know, Eddie. The only reason that might be okay is because I've made every error in doing this. And, and when we write the code, we have to finally get it right after making all the errors. And we try to put some checks in our code itself. So now I'm going to show you yet another little video that'll go fast. I'm getting tired. I'm glad this it's not too long. So this is a video that is going to illustrate how to link the model. So the first thing is we've got that little template, and if you make a change in the template, it's like a what is it, Eddie, in WordPress or something? If you make a change, you can add things. So if you have a new way of that or something, you can add things and put that in the code, and that remains in the code.
That's correct. Yes. Okay.
So now what we're doing is we've got this model. This is the one I just had opened with the video a few minutes ago. And now I made a new book, just a blank book. Okay, and now we go back to our model and press this little button, and I missed it, but now it's just copying the function into our new book. Okay, and this is the kind of stuff we're working on. And now, I did this quickly, I'm opening a new file. And this is a financial model. If Eric's there, I don't know if you're there. Eric, help me make this. It's a very simple model. And right now we have some seasonal stuff going on, some cash flows that go up and down a little bit, who knows? But we have a flat repayment. Okay, and then I kind of missed it right on the bottom. Hetty, you normally in your models, you have an option to make a fixed, just put in the repayment percentages as fixed numbers.
That's correct. Yes. So yes, exactly that.
So that's what we kind of geared it. And so that yellow thing is where you could put, we just made it with a PMT, so it's just fixed. Okay. And what we're going to do is then put the UDF. Now, before I go through that, then I put, I know you'd have a solver page and a copy and paste in a solver page. You can imagine that this is a solver page where we have just a copy and paste. So I change something around and run the copy and paste. Copy and paste works just fine, nothing bad. And now we're putting the UDF into our financial model. We just put it into the financial model, and that little square was supposed to show that there's an input and an output. And I turn off the UDF calculation so we don't, it can go pretty quickly. And then we just kind of have the financial model, and we start linking up things first to the financial model. We link up all the flags, okay? And then it's really important that you link up the non-circular, the CapEx that doesn't have any financing associated with it. Eddie and I have had some problems where if there's a little bit of financing related to some CapEx, that causes a circular reference and that messes things up a little bit. Okay, and then we're putting in just the parameters, and I hope it's not necessarily the case, but you might have the periodic interest rate. That's why it can be monthly or semi-annually or anything else. And then we're putting in the debt service reserve account. And this is a nice simple model. So it took a little bit longer because I've got it on a fast forward, and we put the income tax rate, and basically we've linked up the model. That's fast. And you can imagine, even if you're working on a circular reference, I know you're very quick at producing copy and paste, Eddie, but it takes a little bit of time to put together a copy and paste. So, okay, we're trying to make this as easy as possible. Now, in this example, I had a debt to capital of 90%. And when we ran the UDF, it didn't give us the debt to capital of 90%. And so that's where you might start to struggle. But I realized, okay, and I'm copying a couple of the little whatever drop-down box things. I didn't have a DSRA, so I had to put the DSRA and take it out. And when we're matching these, Hetty, remember how we put the fixed debt in, right?
That's correct, yes.
And now if you just look at this, oh, I can't stop. There, I just had it stopped and I shouldn't have put the button. But that's a big deal. We matched it all up and we get exactly the same results from our copy and paste as from our UDF. Exactly the same sort of things. So now we're making an option, basically. I didn't put a flag in here, but you'd normally even use this flag. And what you would do is you'd say, oh, run it in copy paste mode or UDF mode. So when those auditors are going to complain that code, they can't audit every line of that UDF code, you say, okay, run it in copy paste mode, fine. You leave it in. I think that's Hetty's big point, and I so much agree with it. Sorry, I'm talking instead of you. Okay, I'm just showing that you can run it. I'm changing the debt to capital, and then we can run the copy paste and make sure everything still stays the same. Now, the big deal is then we can put sculpting in. And that old model didn't have different ways to sculpt the debt. So now we're putting in the tenor, and we have a flag that says turn the sculpting on and off for each different debt issue. And once you do that, then you run this again, and hopefully I'm going to show it a little bit smaller, but you can see in line 15 and 16, I didn't show it very well, but that we've shown it on the other ones. That's where you have the debt repayment produced by the UDF. And now we have it all sculpted. Oops. I copied the little buttons here, and now you can start to experiment with the interesting thing in project finance, which is trying different debt size, different debt repayments, different sculpting techniques, and hopefully hopefully that's what you really want to see. And of course, the real issue, and I've heard this from now a number of people, is that you get to the last minute. Can you, maybe Hedy, you can talk about when the interest rate changes and you have to resculpt everything? And
yeah, I mean, that's just a true story, which I am actually experiencing nowadays with the interest rates changing, day by day. And, when you're getting, finalizing your term sheet, you need to come up with the repayment profile. So every day they call me and they say, okay, we have an increase in the base rate. Can you resculpt the debt? So I have to redo, I have multiple tranches. One is like shorter, one is longer. So I need to redo all the time and come up with a different repayment profile on continuous basis. And if I were to do it, with manually, which is something that I think, I used to do before, and that's something that I think most of my colleagues, when I talk to them, that's how they do it. It's kind of painful and time consuming.
that's our idea. Very good. Very, very good. So now let's talk about large models. Okay. And I see many, many more really big models. I'm guilty of that myself. I guess that's with the cloud. You can store as big models as you want, and that. Now, if you think about the way this UDF works, the UDF grabs some data from your sheet. Okay, if it's a large model, it grabs maybe a little bit more data because you have got more debt issues or the VAT. You grab basically you grab some data from your sheet, and then it takes that data, and just like I showed you in the very first example, it does a little do loop. It does its own stuff without touching the model. It goes around and around. It's got the circular references. It computes the DSRA, the sculpting. It does that inside. The time it takes to actually do that in those little examples I showed you is not much more than it would be in a really big model, because it's getting the data, and once it's got the data, it's its own little thing, and then it puts the data out into a report, and that's finished. So that we were shocked, really, in some sense, as how fast the UDF would work in a big model, and maybe for some people that seems to be more important than being able to be flexible with some of the other with the other stuff. So what we're going to do now is show you. Now the truth is, Eddie, remember when we did this, it wasn't so easy at first.
That's correct.
But once you've done it, you've built things in. Once you've got fees on the standby debt and the PRG and the fees on the debt after the repayment period, all that kind of stuff is there now, and we're going to explain how you can change things yourself. Of course, to suggest that we have some kind of magic potion that would solve anything would be absolutely absurd. What we want to do is make sure that it can handle and it can be flexible. Our famous, what are those fast, flexible. I call A accurate, not appropriate. A flexible, accurate, structured, nice and structured with different modules, transparent, so you can see everything. those principles we've really hopefully applied here. So I'm going to show you one before we're going to explain this modular stuff, but show you kind of how this now works with a large model. Okay, so here now, whoops, I got to stop. Okay, at this time, we took a large model. Okay, now to be fair, this large model had a couple of different debt issues. I think it had some blank debt issues in it. And then in the copy paste, they also had a goal seek. So that's why it, I think, took a whole lot of time. So what we did is we took a page of this and then said, oh, let's just change the CapEx and the debt to capital and rerun this.
And it had maybe it's good to add that it had like blocks of copy and paste. So it was like really a big block that was copy and pasted, and that's how they could resolve the circular reference in that model.
Very good, very good. And that's, I think, fairly typical. I've seen others. So I just added a little thing to see how long it takes. And then I'm going 10 times the speed and we're up to 89 seconds. 103 seconds doesn't seem like a long time, but in Excel, it's forever. And then we're now up to 138 seconds, 188 seconds. And finally, and I hope I did this fairly, there was no, by the way, there was no UDF in this model. This is the clean model, and it took about this long. And then depending on what you change, it might have taken a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, okay? And so then we put the UDF into this big model, okay? And we did the same sort of thing, okay? So you've got the inputs and the outputs, so you have to, again, do this business of linking it up, and there's some of the EBITDA numbers and the debt numbers, and for each separate one, debt facility, we have the interest rates. And then we really had to do some work on this because we had two senior debt issues, and then we had some shareholder debt, which caused some circular reference because there was some interest during the construction period, and some VAT debt that had some interest again, that was a circular reference issue. And we have spaces. So each debt issue, they is a little different, but we can add all the different kind of debt issues and the VAT issues. And if you don't have any of these, it doesn't matter whatsoever. And then we have the output, and you can see that at that time I had the different coloring scheme. My coloring scheme is horrible, but you can see now there are a whole lot of much more details in the output. And that's kind of, in Excel is this wonderful tool, but you can't change the reports automatically depending if there's a zero. You can't kind of delete a row. That's what old-fashioned programming can do. I'm not arguing for it at all, but you might have a little flexibility. So now we have a whole lot of more inputs. You remember all this, okay?
That's great.
You might not want to. And then we have a whole, then you can, again, this is, you made the point earlier, you can, if you want, display every single debt issue, have some flags to make sure the debt is being repaid, and there's some PRG detail, and you can add this kind of detail just to your heart's consent. And then this page, I did not do. Eddie, this is your page.
Right.
I didn't have the patience to do this. So what's this first part?
So this is from the financial model. So I took just, a block, it's the same, like the block of, lines from the financial model. And then if we go down, we have another block, which are just, linked to the UDF output sheet. And then I cross-check to see whether, the two matches.
I didn't know. Here, this is from the UDF. Thank you.
This is from the UDF. And then we have a check as well, just to make sure that, our results from the model are in line with the one from the UDF. So that's why Ed calls it parallel model.
So this, in this sheet, how does this one work? If it's 0, that's what you're aiming for, right?
That's correct. So 0 means that, they are both the same, basically. There are no differences between the two.
So very good, thank you. And this was not, this took some time. There was some pain here. Okay.
Yes.
We're not suggesting there wouldn't be. Okay. And then now it's all linked. Now everything is working. Okay. Everything is working. And then all I did there is made a little macro that keeps track of how much time. So we're going to change something. I changed the EPC cost or change the debt to capital. And we know that that causes the circular reference that caused that, however that was, 100 and whatever seconds it was. And now it took 2 seconds. Now that maybe there's something optimistic here. Maybe there's something optimistic here, but that's the sort of dramatic result that we're seeing. And I do have to say, it's a little not exactly fair because that the copy and paste had a goal seek embedded in it, but that's one of the problems of copy and paste is if you're going to have a goal seek, you have to do the goal seek in the copy paste. You can't split it out. Okay, now what this is continuing with that model, and now we try different debt sizing, and this time, I'm not fast forwarding. Okay, this is real time. Okay, I can relax a little, and I had to recalculate. And now we're taking that really big model and just trying different debt repayments and using the same sort of technique where you take that UDF and put it as a fixed repayment. And then the final thing really is we're trying a goal seek, and we're saying, okay, I set a target IRR to 7.5%, and let's see how long the goal seek takes. Now, this goal seek took a long time, but I put all the reports in. We didn't try to be efficient, and we might have some real work to do to make this more efficient. Okay, and the goal seek is, I don't know if you can see it changing. Did you see it changing? Then the NPV is going down to 0. And I put another little timer in, and it took 32 seconds, which is a long time. So we're not saying this is totally perfect, but you can dramatically affect the real circular references, the funding sorts of things. We think we can get this to work faster. So that's really so far the kind of, I hope you can see how it works. We're kind of excited about it. We're not programmers, right? We just kind of mess around. We've been doing this now, like you say, for a long time. But then, Eddie, maybe you can explain how we have tried to make this like the equations like your a spreadsheet, like a modular thing.
That's correct. So when first Ed started, I started working with Ed on this one, and Ed, the second version, Ed, that you made, it was all in one single module, right?
Yes.
So it was like, when the first model that I used to build, back in the days, which was a 1-pager model with inputs on the top, then the calculation, and then the outputs, at the end. So it was that style, so that the way it was formatted was like that. And then, Ed, when Ed made it into the modular form, which is how we see the models that are done in modular way, meaning that, there are different worksheets and every worksheet has its own function. So that's the same exact thing now in the code that you can see now on Ed's screen, that, there are different equations. All of them are named. So if you want to look at the CFADS, you can just go click on it and see all the equations. And there are also the time-based inputs and the constant inputs. So it's exactly looking like, our basic standard financial models.
Very good, Eddie. And then now, if you if you would like to add something or change it, I think we have an example where we don't have grants. Government grants are not in this model. I'm not going to open Excel. I promised myself I wasn't. You need to add, just like we made that dimension variable, you need to add a variable. And when you add a variable, it gets, you define it in the UDF input sheet. And then you find, okay, well, that's going to affect the funding. That's going to affect the funding sources, perhaps. So you go through just like you would do in Excel, but it's a different language. It's like parler français, pas anglais. It's a different way of thinking about the same thing. Now the other thing we have also done is these reports, okay? And before, Eddie, I don't know if you remember this, we had one standard report that had everything in it, and it was kind of horrible. Now you can take these reports and think of them like a spreadsheet. You have to do a little. I didn't display the kind of things you have to do, but you can reformat those reports that we showed you any way you'd like. And if you want to add something in the model, we almost start, it's hopefully as similar to Excel as you possibly can. You add lines into the output, and you specify exactly how it's supposed to work. If funding is supposed to, the grant is supposed to come before the debt issue, for example, you'd put it in the funding report, and you'd document, and you'd be able to drill down and see that your equations were exactly right. I know that's, I did this one without kind of explaining the process, but this is our first try at our
right.
our webinar anyway. And this is amazing to me, Eddie, that we're early. I've never been early on anything in talking in my for so
Correct.
long.
Yes.
So okay. I guess there were a couple of questions. Maybe I can't. What are a couple of them?
Yes, Ed. So we have one actually very interesting question from Tiemen. I'm sorry for my pronunciation, but he's asking the question. I don't know if you can see the question, Ed.
Is it in the chat or?
Yes. So yes. I don't know if we can, have people to speak, Ed. I don't have the option here, but so I'm just going to read the question to you. Suppose you work for a corporate or similar, and suppose you manage to get the UDF template working for a simplified solar project. How do you convince your manager to consider working with this methodology, keeping in mind that your team is usually trained in some type of fast, compliant method by some expensive consultant?
Well, I don't. Oh, what a wonderful question. But Eddie, you're the best one to answer it, much more than me, because you've had this experience a little bit.
That's correct. So yeah, I had the privilege to kind of, discuss it actually with my managers, tell them the pain points and tell them, that there are problems that we can sort out if we have this UDF in the model, and they were kind of convinced. And when I started inserting it in my models and they saw it in action, that it's going to save time during the meetings and it's just making the models more efficient, that was just like a positive thing for them. So I completely understand your concern, Tiem, but my experience was it went quite smooth. And it was quite accepted. And, in a couple of other models that I went back to copy and paste, actually, I got complaints from them saying that, how come you brought back the button? So it was, now they are so much used to it because they are the users. We, the modelers, we are the one who needs to deal with this. As the users, it's much more efficient for them to use this model, which doesn't need, which is faster and has all the functionalities of Excel.
And Brandon, I just saw Brandon's question.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. Brandon asked, why he talked about this. It can be solved algebraically, but it is a
Right.
pain in the okay ass. Okay, good. I tried this. I remember exactly. I was on my brother's boat in the Amazon River when I tried this. That's how I remember. I got obsessed. I thought I got the IDC. You could solve the IDC with a really long algebraic equation. And then you could solve the upfront fee with a equation. Then you got to the commitment fee, and it got to be, I think, almost unsolvable. Then you get to the DSRA. That's even more difficult because that then depends on the future. Then you get to this problem that the interest during construction affects the taxes, and the taxes affect the sculpting. So it's very interesting, Brandon, that you would try this algebraic approach. I spent weeks and weeks. I thought I had it even at one time, and the equations got ridiculously long. If you could do it, it would be brilliant. In a corporate model where you have the classic kind of interest calculation, you can kind of do it. If you have net operating loss, it gets a little difficult actually, but you can make kind of a long algebraic one. But the circular references are the real they're the core of the problem, and they're natural. It's because the term sheet is affected by the model, but the model is then affected by the term sheets. It's almost a natural kind of thing. Okay.
Right. And Ed, Brandon also wants to know whether the same methodology can be used in corporate finance debt structuring, not just project finance.
So that for me, in corporate finance, it's mainly a timing issue. It's mainly that your model might be annual and your interest is, your true interest is day by day, and you want the average balance. You want the average balance. Or a very classic approach is the if you've got some kind of acquisition financing and you have a cash sweep, and the cash flow affects how much you repay the debt, but the repayment is affected by the interest, and so the interest is affected by the debt, and you've got a circular reference. I didn't describe it perfectly, but that one, what I would suggest, and it's a really good question in this sense, sometimes you just do these yourself. You don't need to put this whole, our template in with all our structuring. That one, you could go back to kind of the way we started the seminar, where we showed an example, and you could probably write that yourself. And Hetty, this is kind of something I had forgotten to really go over. A lot more people these days, and understandably, they're incorporating refinancing in their models, either through a mini perm or through just an assumption of refinancing. Okay, you're thinking of mini perms as haircuts.
Yes.
But if I would do that, the circular reference comes about because you're typically going to refinance your debt on the basis of cash flow available for debt service, which is after tax. But the tax is affected by the interest, and the interest is affected about how much refinancing you have. So there's a little circularity there, not a lot. It's not the whole sculpting, curved sculpting. It's not the whole thing. And for that, my suggestion would be to make kind of a little suite. You could use the thing we've shown to really get a handle on the first upfront debt, but then you could almost write your own little UDF yourself. And we're trying to, I hope we have an open mind about things, even about copy and paste, because of course, Hetty, you know that I use copy and paste still. I'm sure you do too.
I do too. Yes.
But we're trying to show you something that's a little more interesting, that could make your life a little better, or not better, but more interesting, more
exactly,
make you a little different. a modeler. Let me put it that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. So Ed, we have other questions if you want to take.
Great.
We are
No,
running out of time, but we
that's
have
okay.
Rick.
People can drop off. We can.
Okay, so
questions.
let's continue. We have Rick. I think, maybe you can answer Rick's question.
Oh, let me see if I can find it.
He's talking about, I should mention that the add-in, okay, so first of all, he's asking whether the UDF and modules are available on your website. And I think everybody on now is aware of, knows about Ed's website, ed.botber.com.
So
you don't have
Rick,
the last one.
I don't have kind of the last ones we've been doing. And I should mention that the add-in available has a lot of functions. Oh, well, I have to look at that. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Is your development, oh, Colin, okay. I don't know how to describe Eddie and us. Well, we haven't thought about the business. What we really want to do is sell the idea, and we would love to work with people and use it as a way to kind of to talk about structuring issues and to talk about modeling and to actually have some training. So we don't know yet. But thank you, Colin. Is that okay, Eddie?
Yes, perfect, Ed.
Sahil, I haven't seen you for so long. I tried in a very simple, but it was not matching. I am totally, Sahil, I totally understand you. Now, what Sahil tries to do, and here is, this is me. If you're going to try something like this, Sahil, thank you. If first of all, this Hedy and I, when we worked through this big model, this was kind of towards the end of I'll call it the end of the pandemic. Really, we started working on this in the pandemic and it was the end. And I feel much, much more comfortable with the latest one, Sahil. And but we beg you, if you're going to try this and you have a problem, please just let us know. I'm not sure if it's going to be adding some double reverse VAT facility. I don't know if, but please, if you can just try it, contact us. Wonderful. Haven't seen the results table from the risk test scenario. Yeah. Center, I'm not sure. Hedy, do you kind of?
So I think, Shaner is a good friend of mine, Ed. From back in the years, So yeah, I think I don't see, why we should add that in the parallel model, Ed, I would say.
You mean that risk stuff?
Scenario analysis. I would think that, once you have it, then you can, add, this in scenario and sensitivity separately in your models. And that one is going to be much easier this time because you can even use data table, which most of us with the copy and paste, we can no longer use the data table, function under Excel. So now that, if you have the parallel model inserted in your model, you can even have data tables for sensitivity and scenario analysis.
Very good. Rick, Hedy, it directed it at you, Hedy. So I'll let you.
Have you worked on a module to handle additions of that's yeah. I mean, there are so many variation of like taxes, depreciation. So yeah, you're right, Rick. It's kind of that's one of the things that you need to maybe go and change things, right, Ed?
Well,
there might be some.
This is way before, this generic macros thing that I made with Hedy, really. In this one, we have something called input functions, right. And we have a depreciation vintage function. And I remember people at Shell did this the same. And that means, you know, you have these gigantic square matrices. If you have depreciation that's not straight line, or if you have a addition, let's say, on a project and its life is shorter than the life of the project, then you have different depreciation rates. So there's a function we made for that. And I have to admit, I haven't looked at it for a little while, but I agree, it's an important problem. And I agree, doing an accurate model requires you to be very careful about the taxes. And this gets into somebody else's question, which was, you know, are there other things to do there? Clearly, we're going to not give up, but I don't think, because we have a webinar even now. But the kind of tax issues that are going around now, where you can't deduct all of the interest, and where you have a net operating loss that expires. We've worked all of those things out in Excel, and our process is really to work them out in Excel, make a simple kind of analysis, and then try to incorporate it into the model. Okay.
Perfect, Ed. Yes, I think
okay.
we're done. Thanks, everyone. It was,
Thanks,
I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ed. Really, it was
and we made
wonderful.
A recording of this. So
right.
The reason we made a recording is if you show it to your boss and say, okay, come on, look at what you can do. That who asked that consultant question? I'm sorry. I think that's so wonderful. Okay. Unless they're consultants on that. Okay, great. Okay, which I am, so I don't know. Okay, very good.
All right, thanks everyone. So Ed, we can share the presentation, the slides with everyone after the session ends, right?
Of course, and I'll share the recording. Good. Okay.
That's perfect. All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Ed.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye everyone. Great.